helicopter to take me around. And I don't have these Secret Service agents, you know, with their funny little things. They're all important. I just have a bunch of Iowa kids that are part of my campaign that are running this. They don't look like much, but they're good. So, I'm ready. I'm ready to take your question. Yes.
In order to be the moral leader of the world, one question I have, and especially given your experience, what do you do with a country like Saudi Arabia? We recently read a woman raped, was charged originally with 200 lashes for getting into the car of men. She was the one that was raped, and up until recently, this was going to pass by Saudi Arabia, a strong political ally of the United States. How do you deal with the political allies who morally may not pass the muster, at least the way we view it?
You know, I was asked at one of these debates. By the way, do you all watch these debates? Do you? Because I'm thinking of not showing up anymore. I'm kidding. The last one, I finally got some attention. But you notice they always, before this debate, I always end up sitting next to Dennis Kucinich. Who's my friend. I'm not complaining, but you know, I don't know if I have an unlucky draw, but they say they do it randomly. It's always with Dennis in the front. Here's my answer. Here's my answer. And I refer to a debate where somebody said, well, Governor, do you think human rights is important in determining the American relationship with another country? The answer is yes. It's probably paramount. And I stand behind that statement because I believe that America should link relationships with countries that practice democracy, fair elections, trade unionism, not torture their people, not have emergency orders like we have in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia too. You know, this is a country not only that mistreats its own people and has these ridiculous laws, but also in their elementary schools, and this is an ally of America, so-called, teaches anti-Americanism in their schools. And that is wrong. So yeah, I would say to the Saudi Arabians, I would say to the Musharrafs of the world, if you want to have a good relationship with a new administration, this is what's important, that you respect democracy. And Mr. Musharraf, this means that you will have elections in January, that election that you canceled, and that you allow political parties to oppose you and let the people of your country decide. And that you lift this emergency order that you have in your country that doesn't permit dissent where it's legitimate, that you release the thousands of political prisoners and journalists that you have in your country. And furthermore, Mr. Musharraf, part of the $11 billion that we've given you to your military is for you to help us track down terrorists on your border with Afghanistan, which you're not doing. So the answer is yes. The answer is with Saudi Arabia. In my administration, the treatment of your own people, not torturing your own people, having values of democracy and human rights, respecting the Geneva Convention. This is why we lose our moral leadership. Because countries say, oh, yeah, America, you're lecturing on this, and you have Guantanamo, and you have secret prisons, and you don't permit habeas corpus. That's what we need to change in this country. Yes.
Okay, hope I say this right. Time magazine made Vladimir Putin Man of the Year. In him thinking, his statement said that he believed Americans thought he was a savage. Now, I don't know if everybody else thought that. I never thought the man was a savage. But he says that's what he thinks we think of him. How would you change that? Thinking on his part.
Here's what I would say. There are two very important relationships that America has with major powers that we need to fix. And that doesn't mean that we go easy on them. One is with China, and one is with Russia. I mean, I'll answer Russia. But China is one where I think we need to be tougher on them, on trade and human rights. But you know, we owe a large part of our national debt to them, $9 trillion, commercial banks, Japan, China. So they have a little leverage over us. Yet China sends us defective toys. They don't believe in democracy in their elections. They don't help us in Darfur with saying to the Sudanese government, stop the genocide or we won't buy your oil. They don't help us in Tibet. They don't help us in Burma. And so I say that the relationship has to change. They manipulate currency. Barbara, again, in the governor's residence in New Mexico, there are two individuals that have more clout than the governor. And that's me. Two cats, Squeaky and Jake. And the first lady had called me recently, and she said, there's this report about contaminated cat food from China. What are you doing about it? That's paramount for me. I illustrate that because, we have to, when we have these defective products that come from China and Russia and the United States, we need to speak out on them. And we're not doing that. But here's my answer with Russia. We have to decide whether Russia and China, but let's take Russia, are they a friend or an enemy? I think you got to ask that. And to be simplistic, you pick one or the other. I would call the relationship one of strategic competitor. They're a strategic competitor. But they're also an important relationship. I would then put a list and say, what do we need from Russia? What does Russia need from us? This is what we need from Russia. One, we need them to stop selling nuclear fuel to Iran, which they just announced 3 days ago. Number two, we need with Russia, and if I'm president, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call Putin. And Bush claimed he had a special relationship with him. He looked him in the eye and saw a blood brother. Yeah, not too good results. And I would say to Putin, we have 10,000 nuclear weapons. Mr. Putin, you have 8,000. We need to reduce them. We need to find a way to create an international system where nations use nuclear weapons a lot less. We need a dramatic reduction. Let's come together. I would also say to Mr. Putin, look, you're mistreating your people in Chechnya. You rigged this election, so you're now prime minister. And even though you're no longer president, you're going to call the shots, and that's not democracy. But so be it. Now, what we need is for Russia to stop selling this uranium fuel to Iran. Russia's mad at us because we want to build a missile system over them. In a way, I don't blame them because this missile system, first of all, doesn't work. It's not scientifically proven it's going to work. And we also lecture Russia about human rights when we have our own human rights stains. So what I'm saying to you is you got to develop a personal trust with these leaders, even though they may be bad. You got to be able, in times of crisis, in times when there's a national interest really at stake, to be able to deal with the issues that divide us. Russia also has enormous amounts of energy. So they are raking in this $96 per barrel that we're paying. That's 1/3 of our trade deficit. So if you're mad at Russia, if you're mad at terrorism, one way that we're financing them is by us paying $96 per barrel for oil. And this is why we have to make this dramatic shift to renewable forces. So that's the kind of relationship that I would have. One based on strategic competition, one where we speak out on what's important to us, that's human rights, that's make sure the American people get a fair deal on issues relating to trade. But we also have one last point, and that is Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons and a lot of loose nuclear materials out there that we need to secure. Because the last thing we want is for a terrorist to go to Russia on the black market, buy a nuclear material, and use it in an American city. So there are a lot of issues at stake. That's what I would do with Russia.